You're welcome.
Okay, so now we're live. Hi, good day everyone. Welcome to another edition of International Climate Change Development Initiative Africa's series. And this month we're focusing on food security. So now today we have a special guest in our midst. His name is Mr. Tabi Jordan. And just before I introduce him, the topic for today's series is leveraging restoration to address impact on land degradation on food security. Like I mentioned before, this month we'll be focusing on food security. So now over to you, Mr. Tabi Jordan. Kindly introduce yourself to our viewers.
I think you have introduced me, but let me add to that. I'm Tabi Joda.
Yes.
I'm a conservationist and a community-based resilience expert.
Mm-hmm.
And I work mostly around communities' ecosystem restoration, resilience, and agroforestry efforts or practices that deliver on disaster risk reduction, resilience, food systems, and land restoration in its entirety. And I'm very
Okay.
pleased to be with you in this show. Thank you for having me.
Thank you. Thank you for being a guest on our show. So now moving on to the crux of the matter for today, which is on food security. So now, before I even go into the questions, what exactly is food security? I think we need to define that term for our viewers so they can have like an understanding of where we're coming from and also have an understanding of what our guest understands by food security before we delve into the questions for today.
Yeah, food security, like security is a word that's like a household word. So when you say food security, you mean a situation where people have sufficient food, but not only limited to sufficient food that is nutritious enough and that is also safe enough and that is available at the time when people need it.
Okay, so basically what you're saying is that even if I have food, but I'm not able to access it whenever I need it, I'm not basically food secured. Because we have a lot of people that have food probably eat one time a day, but are not food, they don't have it as a necessity, they don't have it in constant, like it's not a regularity for them to have that food. So you're basically saying that they don't have food security, even if they're having food every day, but it's not available resource for them. Is that what you're telling our viewers today?
Yes, that's true. An example in Nigeria is the recent End SARS movement, where or the COVID situation, where many governors and Nigerian leaders hoarded a lot of food in
Mm.
warehouses where people were not having food. People were actually going hungry. So
Yeah.
that's a situation of food security. There is food, but someone is not having access to that food.
Mm-hmm.
So that's
Mm-hmm.
some aspect of food insecurity. So when that
Yes,
food
yes.
is available and people
Mm-hmm.
have access to it, I mean,
Yeah.
efficient and equitable access to that food, that is actually real food security.
Because when I saw the videos of the palliatives and people going to and the hoarding of the palliative, it actually made me, I was like, wow, so these things were available for the resources of Nigerians, but it was hoarded by, I don't know, the government or whoever it was hoarded by. But when people got to know about their location, people really rushed to wherever the location and I started actually taking the food because they were actually hungry. That goes to show that in Nigeria we really don't have food security in Nigeria for the mere fact that that incident happened and we saw the crowd within those palliative areas. We saw how everything was. So thank you very much, Mr. Tabi Jordan, for telling us about food security. Now moving on to the first question. What is the effect of land degradation on food security? So now this question is divided into two segments. What is the effect of land degradation on food security? Let's just go with that for now. What is the effect of land degradation on food security?
Yeah, land degradation first. It's a situation or a consequence of misuse, unsustainable practices on landscape that results to conditions where lands become unproductive or land become let's say productive land becomes unproductive or productive land become inaccessible for production, right? But most often it is the consequence of unsustainable practices or agricultural practices, industrial practices that leads to land degradation. And when land degrades, it becomes very difficult for production of food to take place, especially in Africa, where our agriculture is land-based, it is rain-fed, and it is human labor intensive. So when you have acres and acres of land, like you can see, you go to places in many parts of western, north central, and northwestern region of Nigeria, you see vast lands. But the amount of food that is produced on this landscape is very limited because the land is degraded. Its natural nutrients are lost. So it's only when people so this result to insufficient food production. And when there is insufficient food production, ultimately, those people, those mouths out there, Nigeria has over 180 million mouths. Africa has over 1 billion mouths right now. And the world itself has over 7 billion mouths. So when you have landscapes in America that are degraded, landscapes in Australia that are degraded, landscapes in Africa that are degraded, landscapes where you are in your own country and probably in your own state where you are right now that are degraded, it actually has a consequence on limiting the amount of food production and even the nutritional level of the kind of food that is produced on this land, consequently leading to a situation where many people are staying with insufficient food, hence food insecurity.
Okay, so now based on what you said, something just struck to me now is that so if a land is degraded, is there a possibility whereby, because I know that we have desertification where obviously the land has gone, there's now a desert on top of it. So we have different ways of which land can actually become degraded. So is there a possibility whereby we can ensure that probably the land does not go into degradation, or if a land has gone into degradation, are there ways for which we can ensure that land becomes better, which we can actually farm on that land? Are there ways, maybe through science or whatever means, or through farming activities, that we can ensure the land does not degrade, or even if it has degraded, what are the ways in which we can ensure that it becomes a land that we can actually farm on?
Yeah, that's where restoration comes in. And restoration is not just the process of rescuing a degrading land. It also includes the processes where you conserve land and protect it from getting degraded. So to say in a nutshell, restoration is the solution, and there are different types of restoration. Like I said, you have pre-restoration, you have restoration during the process whereby the farming or agricultural practices are done in such a way that they are really sustainable. They actually don't excessively encroach. For instance, when you use excessive chemicals on land, you know, even if you have 1,000 trees on that land, you don't know how much the chemicals are actually impacting on the soil nutrient. At the same time, you can imagine how much some farmers without knowledge are using pesticides, insecticides, and herbicides on the land. You can imagine how sometimes the amount of pesticides, the amount of herbicides that are used on this land actually, sink, they leach into the soil, destroying the soil health. So this is during practice. And then after practice, the way you conserve a landscape after agriculture needs to be sustainable. So all this you have pre-restoration, during practice restoration, and after practice restoration. So it's a conservation or conservational restoration process that actually ensure that land before use is sustainable. During use, it's sustainable, and after use, it's sustainable. Restoration is the solution.
It really is. So now you mentioned something about the farmers. Are there ways in which, because you have so many people that are farming but are not probably aware of the hazardous effects of probably the chemicals they use, or things that are actually harmful to the agricultural land. So are there probably awareness initiatives, sensitization initiative for farmers out there to ensure that the crops which you're growing, the pesticides they're using, the chemicals you're using are actually good for the land and also for the crops in which they're producing?
Yeah, many questions in one. First is that are there awareness campaigns? Yes, there are awareness campaigns, but I think knowledge is just one thing. Adapting to knowledge, imbibing knowledge, and also inculcating the knowledge is another thing. So this is where your government or the government wherever comes in, because governments are the ones who provide the regulatory mechanism where the regulatory mechanisms that actually help institutionalize certain practices or provide the overall guidance that can help farmers to understand better. You see, when governments say don't come out on Sunday because there is a risk of disaster, people don't come out. When government said during COVID that people shouldn't come out because of the risk of contacting COVID, people didn't come out. So this same methodology can be used by government to say, look, if you use insecticides excessively, they will destroy they will leach into your crops, and from your crops they will leach into your soil. That would destroy your soil for future or future cultivation. That's one. Two, campaigns like this, like the discussion between you and I now, should also filter into the corridors where the people on the margins of economy, the people on the margins, the rural farmers, can actually have access to this information, understanding that insecticides are good, but they are actually really dangerous if you use them in the wrong way. Fertilizers are good if you use them in the right and proper dosage. But if you use them in the wrong dose, if you use them in inappropriate dosages and at the wrong time in the wrong way, you actually destroy not just the health of the soil, but the future of that soil. And so certainly, uh, like you asked, what should be done? A lot of things should be done. It should go beyond education. It should filter into people's minds like culture, like religion. People go to church every day. People go to church every day with Bibles in their hands to go and listen to someone preach to them. They trust pastors. Some people go to mosque every Friday to go and listen to imams preach to them. We should have also this kind of knowledge, you know, sink into people's minds like spirit, sink into people's mind like religion, sink into people's mind like a national anthem. So I don't see any difficulty in that. I am very hopeful that this is simple knowledge that can actually go down into the mainstream of rural farmers, young prospective farmers, to understand the better ways or more appropriate ways of utilizing these very good but hazardous chemicals.
Okay. So now, based on everything you have said, how does land degradation, how does it impact agricultural productivity?
Well, adding to what I said earlier, that land degradation entails the loss of soil nutrient, the loss of the biodiversity of a particular ecosystem. You know, so when this loss takes place, it actually impedes, it hampers soils flexibility. Soils have dexterity, soils have flexibility, soils have dynamics. They have their own kind of behavior. The biology of a soil is a mix of different components of nitrogen, of oxygen, and earthworms, and different microorganisms that put soil into the state of fertility. So when these activities, or when these unsustainable or improper practices actually happen that degrades the soil, it ultimately erodes the soil's ability to produce, what it ought to be producing. So hence degrading the land. And when land is degraded, productivity is sometimes even absent. You have seen situations where farmers actually grow acres of land, grow maize. I have seen this in Uganda, 2017, where a whole a whole 10 acre of land was planted somewhere in Karamoja, but even with the rain, the maize was not going beyond half a meter, and there was no production. I have seen a situation in Kaduna State, Nigeria, where white beans was planted in very large acres of land, and these beans grew very fresh, but they didn't put flower. They didn't bear flowers. And when plants don't bear flowers, they will not bear any crops. And the question some people asked me then was, what could be the problem? So the land was degraded, either as a result of excessive fertilizers or the degradation from the unsustainable previous practices that actually cut down so many of the trees that were producing nitrogen to that soil. I mean, it goes on and on and on.
Thank you. So that what you just said even leads me to my next question. I want to ask you about the probably practical things you've experienced in your farming activities. What has actually happened, probably to you or to a friend of yours, and you've actually met.
Don't forget, I'm on the field. So don't forget I'm on the field. So if you see a snake chasing me here, please be ready to.
It's fine. It's fine. We perfectly understand. We perfectly understand. So
I'm sitting actually on the stump of a tree. So you need to also appreciate my environment, so you know that where I am.
Yes.
So,
yes.
Anyway, that's fun.
Yes.
Good.
So going back to my question. So now, from your own practical experiences, like you even mentioned some of them. I think you mentioned one in Uganda. So what happens after those things actually happen? When you realize that the land is degraded and the fruits are not producing, what happens to the crops itself? What happens to the crops that have probably been planted? Do they go bad, or what's that process? Can you walk us through that process after you realize that, probably this land has been degraded and something that happened to you either personally or to a friend? What happens during the transmission?
I think it's like a woman giving birth to a child, and the child comes out with one leg, or coming out with a handicap. So the possibility of having a child born with one leg is difficult to reverse that child into the womb and rebuild that child's one arm or one leg. So most often that's what you call food loss.
Wow.
That's a food loss, and the food loss results into mostly famine, like you have seen, where all this. So there is no way. The only thing the people can do, if they are innovative enough, is to convert probably the leaves or the stalks into animal fodder or into manure. But the human needs or the human derivatives from there are completely, absent. So in terms of solution for that, this ought to have rung a bell into the minds of the people to know that when we degrade our land, when you overuse land, when you over-chemicalize land, when you use too much pesticides on land, in fact, quote unquote, when you have consequences, and those consequences are the food loss, which results to food insecurity. And if it's a farmer who's depending on those crops for income, then the whole year of income, or there's going to be no income from that. And if it is someone who borrowed money from a family or a friend or from a bank, then they become indebted. In whichever way. So once land produces its results that are not potentially needed, what else? Maybe you have a better answer.
Yeah, the S fact. So okay, now so you spoke about the losses, food loss, and the resulting effect, especially to the farmers at hand. So mainly farmers, if you're actually a commercial farmer, that means you most likely depend on that for your own livelihood, your source of livelihood. You have no other source of livelihood at that instance. So what exactly are there corporations or initiatives to support farmers that are probably, maybe because of land degradation, have lost or have food loss, thereby they can't actually access the economy, or probably that they can't sell their produce? Are there initiative cooperatives, maybe farmers cooperatives to assist, aid the farmers who have actually been subjected to one way or the other, because of food loss or because of land degradation? They are not able to supply the needed quantity to the market to be able to ensure their basic livelihoods are met.
Yeah. All this exists. That is why insurance is very important. And some doing very well, some not also doing very well in different places. I have seen that in Uganda, functioning very well. I've equally seen that in Kenya, functioning very well. But you see, it's something that is not one way thing, or just one solution fix all. In this case, in Nigeria, have insurance corporations that actually should be able. Were you in Nigeria in November and December? Did you notice the shortage of onion in the market?
Yes, I did.
Good, good. So these are some of the examples that you can see where, and then because of that, many farmers who planted onions had their onions lost to floods. In Kebbi, in some places, they have washed away by flood. Unfortunately, I can't speak for the cooperatives and I can't speak for the initiatives, but I know a couple of these initiatives that exist, and they have these objectives to protect farmers after food loss and things like that. And I think UNDRR also has something on its resilience approach, which has to do with these kinds of insurance, but it needs to be explored. However, it's difficult to find him because, let me, for example, I don't want to say I can vouch that actually exists. But for instance, like in Nigeria, when there was COVID, when people actually needed food, some governors even were hoarding the food. So
Yeah.
I think I don't want to sound contradictory here to say this is an existing opportunity in Nigeria or in some few countries. I've seen that serious insurance corporations that, or when they borrow, they cannot reservice the loan for agriculture production. But the solution here is for civil society organizations to step in and call upon government in these cases and speak to them that, well, those farmers are actually very independent, but they need to have this kind of oil cannot process production. The government should be able to come in, or other agencies should be able to come in. So that's just a bit of a critical overview, but at the same time, like a recommendation. And probably maybe from your side, do you know of any in Nigeria? I know of a few, I said, but the few are not really at the top. They're not really doing well the way I expected. If not, we
Yeah.
should have better approaches to managing food scarcity.
Mm-hmm. Because you have to realize that food is a basic necessity. So one way or the other, this has to. Hello, Tabi, are you there? I think your network is breaking.
That is why the food system, one of the things the food system summit is looking at now, the approaches the food system is bringing. If you look at the 5 action tracks of the food system, and of course the approaches of the food system summit, which it actually looks at driving actions that helps in building this resilience, in terms of food from farm to fork, food value chains, how food can be protected. How, yes, because what we are producing, sometimes we overproduce, sometimes we underproduce. So projections are poor. Sometimes production is impacted by risk. Like I earlier said, the floods in these states in Nigeria that affected lands and crops. The Food System Summit by the UN Food System is actually looking at building very strong policy frameworks around these to be able to support governments. And I as part of the African Youth Leaders in Food System, it's also one of my role to see that these kind of solutions are brought on board, bring on board this type of innovative ideas that can circumvent these challenges that are obviously, impacting our farmers, impacting farmers like us, because I'm a farmer.
Okay, thank you. I definitely learned a lot from all you've said. So now let's move on to our next question, which is so we have extreme weather events. Extreme weather events are destroying infrastructure, displacing people, and causing drought. Now the question: how do we prevent soil degradation to boost food production? Did you get the question?
I get you perfectly well.
Yeah.
Yeah, first, extreme weather events are product of human activity that are impacted on our landscapes. For instance, when deforestation, which often results to hard pans, to dryness, to droughts, and to excessive rains, or sometimes rain deficit, or flash floods. Most of all these are results of the degradation of land degradation, and most often directly to deforestation. And deforestation sometimes owing to illegal logging or excessive legal logging, and probably bombing of our forest, and conversion the importance of the importance that the vegetation actually consists. So this often now creates the extreme weather events. And extreme weather events are just like, for example, the flood I talked about earlier, where people planted, where flood actually swept thousands and thousands of acres of onion farms, right? So when this happens, the direct consequence is destruction of crops, and consequently is food loss, and consequently to food loss is food insecurity, hunger, much people chasing very little food available, and so at the end of the day, this actually does not only impact on food security, it does not only impact on the social system or even the mental health of people. It impacts far beyond, even in the way in the way people behave. So you can see even violence erupting because of scarce resources. You see a lot of crime wave rising. You see lots of people dying because of hunger. So we should go beyond the consequences of degradation, the consequences of food, the food insecurity, the consequences of mental health, these are actually really, really far beyond this. So extreme weather events can now be prevented, or can actually be reversed through restoration, planting of trees, reforestation, restoring the ecosystems, protecting and conserving biodiversity, and actually reviving or revolutionizing or transforming agroforestry practices in such a way that they don't only deliver on food, they also deliver on the social aspects that helps people live in cohesion, that helps people to be able to reduce the risk of disasters, that also helps people in reducing the risk of mental ill health, and helps people in reducing the conflict resulting from controllable resource scarcity.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Tabi. So now you mentioned something about risk
Yeah,
reduction, because it, like I just asked you about the weather patterns and things like that. So now I want to understand, you talked about risk reduction. So are there ways in which you farmers ensure that you reduce your risk to the barest minimum? Probably, I don't know, the weather patterns, ensuring that if, because obviously we have the weather forecast, so you're obviously going to be monitoring the weather, ensuring that this is not going to be harmful to your crops or to your animals or things that have to do with your farming activities. So what are the ways that you farmers yourselves ensure that you reduce all sorts of risk that can end up affecting food security to the barest minimum?
well, I think there is no one approach. It is one approach in this. There are really several risks. The physical risk of extreme weather conditions are entirely have a very large upstream, downstream consequences, and of course, different farmers with different knowledge systems, with different traditional and indigenous knowledge practices, and of course orientations, have different ways of understanding risk, and each landscape has its own risk. So I can speak generally what the main risk in agriculture are, but if it has to do with the main ones, the risk of pest, the risk of drought, the risk of floods, the risk of probably planting in the poor time, or poor timing, or the risk of not even following the meteorological forecasting, which are often very precise and scientifically true. But my dear, the truth is sometimes some farmers can actually reduce this risk, especially those who have this knowledge, those who have this orientation. But what about those who don't have this orientation, or those who don't believe, in this science, because it often comes with a lot of scientific jargon and very complex, mystifying, uh, scientific analysis or systems or communication. So, in terms of understanding risk, we have to really segment landscape by landscape, but there are really varied risks, like I earlier mentioned. But generally, just to reduce this risk, especially risk of extreme weather events, is to make sure that the farming practices are actually sustainable.
Mm.
And to make farm practices sustainable is to understand each landscape. If this landscape was initially a forest land, then there should be forest existing side by side with crops.
Mm.
Not a
Mm.
situation where if you go brush down a whole forest and then you plant beans or maize and you think the maize, you know, when when windstorms come, you count yourself losing the
Yeah.
crops.
Yeah.
When flash floods come, you find yourself counting losses from this.
Mm.
So I think by and large, it's a really really an issue of being dynamic, or the dynamics of different societies, different communities. So, but generally, it is just for people to understand that risk is general, risk is
Mm-hmm.
universal.
Mm-hmm.
Reducing risk also is universal, and the risk sensitiveness, having the risk sensitiveness, the risk awareness, the risk readiness is very important for farmers. It is
Yeah.
important for protecting landscapes and ensuring food
Food security. Okay, Mr. Tabi, I think your network is. Can you hear me?
security. Thank you.
Okay. So basically we need to understand the landscapes of our farming, of our farms. We need to understand that in depthly to understand the risks that accrue with our farming activities. And for that, we also need to also be sustainable in our thinking, sustainable in our farming activities to ensure that it's not just about the now, but we're thinking about the long term, the middle term, and even the short term of all our activities. Thank you very much for that, Mr. Tabi,
Yes,
for the
and then farmers need to know. Farmers need to be risk sensitive. Farmers need to be risk
yes.
aware. They need to be
Mm-hmm.
risk ready. Risk readiness is very important. Understanding risk is important. You can't
Mm-hmm.
reduce risk without understanding risk. So
Understanding it. Mm.
in every context, the people need to understand what the contextual risk. They need to also understand the general risk. They need to be risk aware so that they can be risk ready. Readiness is a key thing for readiness and preparedness. They are very key to preventing disaster losses.
Mm-hmm.
If people are
Yes,
not
it is.
ready, they are not prepared, they can hardly reduce risk.
Yeah.
And even
Yeah.
when risk happens, even when hazards happen or hazard becomes disasters, you reduce the cost, you reduce human injury, you reduce human losses and economic losses because of a preparedness.
Yeah. Yes. I totally agree with you. Thank you so much. So
You're welcome.
now moving on to the next question. How do we improve vital ecosystem structures to effectively strengthen food production and supply? Did you understand the question? How do we improve vital ecosystems to effectively strengthen food production and supply?
Well, first and foremost, every ecosystem is very vital. Some apply to humans.
Ooh. Okay, I think we lost Mr. Tabi Jordan for a while. Okay,
Some
yeah,
are
he's back.
vital. Some are vital to biodiversity, just like that itself. So every ecosystem, first and foremost, is vital. But now, when they are threatened, when they are declining, how do we improve on them?
Mm-hmm.
How do we enhance them or enhance their potentials to be stable and remain resilient? Is for us to 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 actually imbibe the attitudes of sustainability, sustainable practices in terms of sustainable agriculture, sustainable livestock production, sustainable food processing, sustainable food transportation, sustainable forest, forest logging or forest exploitation. I don't want to say logging because it's a kind of derogatory, but so
Mm-hmm.
if people have to cut down trees, they have to replant more.
Yeah.
If people have, if urbanization is going to take place somewhere, and the community is relying on a spring or a river that provides fishes to them or provides aquatic life for them, we have to weigh the importance of the ecosystem and the urban housing. Houses can actually be located somewhere else and save a vital ecosystem. Like I see in Abuja City, I see in Lagos, where the mangroves regions that actually produce a lot of lobsters and oysters and the shrimps and I know different aquatic life because that is part of agriculture. That's where those farmers who live there depend very much on that as part of their food system, part of their own income. Those are their own agricultural system. So these vital ecosystems have actually been brushed down. I see I was in Cameroon recently in the Tico region, and you see how the vital mangroves area in Tico and Limbe and have been brushed down, and in Douala. So, and the same, like I visited Congo last 2 years, and I was very shocked by the level at which the Congo rainforest is being brushed down, but forgetting to look at how the consequences of that is bearing on the lives of the people. So, the protection of these vital ecosystems has to do with a concerted effort with civil society, individuals, actors who are on the field, you know, and the experts to take charge in providing good knowledge, providing the expert advice that actually delivers on people imbibing the culture of, you know, live, produce, grow side by side the ecosystem's protection and its own survival, so that whatever thing we are producing today, we can continue producing it tomorrow and in the future, ensuring the food safety or the food production and even the supply chains, like you earlier asked, right? Supply chains are only a product or result of availability. If food is not available, the supply chain will be absent. And supply chain will be effective in such a way that it actually delivers its own positive role on the people when the people actually, you know, produce sustainably. There is no point producing this year and next year the production is not there.
Yeah.
We have to start going to brush down another valley to produce maize. After that valley has lost it's degraded, we have to go and start brushing another forest to produce food. This is not sustainable. So it's all about decision. It's all about expert
Mm-hmm.
conversation. It's all about providing this knowledge out there and pushing for the policy system that actually sustains, protects, conserve, and preserve these vital ecosystems for our own vital survival or vital sustenance.
Hmm. That because that just reminds me that decisions are very important. That even if in whatever probably whatever profession you're in, decisions that are being made is very vital to the success of any project, of any job, of any even our own lives itself. So having sustainable decisions that we are taking for our farming activities for the long term is very key to its success. So ensuring that we have we have food production that is strengthened and the supply chain is not broken from year in, year out. That is very key.
Yeah,
Okay.
absolutely.
Yeah. Yes.
Yeah.
Thank you. So now I know you have you're working on the 1 billion trees in Nigeria that I know you're
1
part
billion
of.
feet for Africa.
Yes, sorry, for Africa, 1 billion trees for Africa. And obviously, relating it back to the farming activities, I know climate change is also a very big issue because of the whole effect it's having to the environment, the ozone layer, the climate itself, and it's being related to your own farming activities. So now tying all these things together, how does climate change affect land degradation, affect food security, and the 1 billion trees for Africa, how is it a tool to actually help climate change itself, help food security, help the agricultural sector?
Yeah, thank you. We are seeing African societies living on the front line of climate impact,
Mm-hmm.
and often, you know, obviously, a consequence of a lot of land degradation. Africa has been like the continent of forest. It's a forest continent, and we've lost more trees than we've lost any resources in Africa. We've lost more trees than we lost slaves in Africa in the last centuries. And of course, the truth is, the 1 billion trees for Africa is a solution that provides a holistic. It actually is a solution solution that provides holistic fixing of Africa's systems, starting from the mending or reviving biodiversity, reviving ecosystems, and reviving degraded lands, restoring these landscapes, and making sure that the landscapes restored value is actually trickled down into providing social opportunities, economic opportunities for people, for green growth, for income, for jobs, and of course, at the same time, sinking the millions of carbon that is needed that is needed right now to sink into needed to be sequestered to reduce the amount of the climate impact, the CO2 in the atmosphere. And you are living in Nigeria. I don't actually know where you live in Nigeria, but of course, I know the impact of climate now. You see even the weather patterns in Lagos, in Port Harcourt, are shifting very dramatically. And the wind patterns, the flash floods, and even the floods themselves are actually changing. So the billion trees is a solution. It's like a knot that is is being fitted on a bowl that has been loose for so many years or centuries now. But it should not just be a bowl by in terms of tree cover. No, the Africa Great Green Wall. It's a very important climate and SDG and NDC, and of course a holistic African approach to reduce land degradation and climate impacts across the Sahel and even the Kalahari, Southern Africa. And the billion trees for Africa actually delivers on the field and on the ground restoration efforts to feed on the Great Green Wall's implementation. So to say, in response to your question, this is not just a response to direct climate impacts now, it's a future and long-term response to safeguarding the future of our generations and all the grassroots communities that are living on the front lines of climate impacts, including you and I.
Yeah. Thank you so much. So now we're coming to the conclusion of our talk for today. So now we're going to the recommendations. What are your recommendations for policymakers, for non-government organizations, for private sectors, and other related stakeholders? Let me start. Tabi, are you there?
Hello?
Yes, I can hear you. Can you hear me?
Can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
Oh, good. Thank you. So my recommendations are first, we African governments must be aware that development is not a one-size-fits-all approach. Development must be holistic. One very key example, if you concentrate development in the capital city in Abuja and Lagos, you are telling everybody in the village to move from the village to live in Abuja and Lagos. And the consequence to that is that they will be living and creating more urban slums.
True.
Right?
Very true.
That's one.
Yes.
So in terms of when governments are unable to keep the critical mass of people who are producing the food that has been consumed in the cities, when they would have left all from the communities into the city will now be packed by people who are completely not productive, and the communities, landscape, and the agricultural fields will be left unproductive. So this is the holistic approach that government should look at, not just speaking about food security like something that you can just throw somewhere and then it germinates. No, it's a holistic approach. Approach development with concerted, well-guided science and research and experience. Right?
Very true.
Because food security is a product of policy.
Yes.
Food security is a product of availability of human labor to grow food.
Yeah.
Food security is the product of availability of productive landscape where productive humans, where well-guided policies can help the production of food. Food security means security for the human being who is actually working and having no fear of danger, no fear of hurt, no fear of violence, no fear of injustice. Food security means availability of, equity in the system, right?
Yeah.
Social justice in the system, the rule of law in the systems, where somebody, where a government official who is asked to supply fertilizer to local farmers and he fails to supply the fertilizer can be called to book. He can be taken to court, and a local farmer can actually charge him in court and win a case against him, even if he's a senator, even if he's a member of parliament, even if he's a president, even if he's the president's wife, even if he's the president's son or president's relative. So food security, it's a whole system. That's why the United Nations Food Systems Summit that will be in few months from now is not just looking at food security as a segment of society, but a holistic system, a holistic practice. That's why it's food system. So food security means where those who understand the practice are the ones who are taking the decisions how the practice is done. Food security means when someone, when somebody who is actually meant to do a responsibility is not doing that responsibility, he or she can be held responsible. This is how we can actually garner force, power, energy, and decisions around enhancing food security. But aside that, practically on the field, we must approach food production with science and research. Science
That's a very
research
big one.
is
Yes, it is.
very important.
Yeah. Very,
Science
very
in the sense
important.
that every decision on farming must be well guided, because there is no point producing food that will be washed by an extreme weather event. So science comes in where the meteorological service works very well and provides state-of-the-art information for the farmers, and the farmers are taught how to learn and understand how to adapt to this system. At the same time, research in the sense that as times are changing, as population is rising, how can we efficiently produce more food using limited income, using limited capital, limited human labor, and limited landscapes, land systems, especially in Africa where agriculture is land-based, it's rain-fed, it's labor-intensive. So innovation also comes in here. And that's where one role, we're providing climate smart agroforestry innovations that are actually enhancing the efficiency with which food is produced, the efficiency with which lands are restored, the efficiency and smartness with which the people actually get involved in doing this. But by and large, NGOs, civil societies, experts like you and I have a very strong role to play, to call government, to help to hold our leaders accountable, to ask them to do what they are being elected to do. We shouldn't shy about this. Leadership is there to provide leadership. So they should take responsibility. So it is your responsibility to hold me responsible. It's my responsibility to hold you responsible. It is our responsibility to be responsible. So it is their responsibility to also be responsible. So all these has to do with the entire system where people are actually playing their role, and we are ensuring that nobody sleeps with an empty stomach. Everybody has good food, safe and nutritious food to sleep, to go to bed and to wake up healthy.
I think this also ties to the second goal of SDGs, which is on zero hunger. Then you also have so based on your recommendation, it's basically saying that every person we have to have a synergy. We can't have any lacuna within the system for food security to actually take its proper course. Basically, that everybody has a part to play. And from that, I just want to ask you because we're running out of time. We have less than 5 more minutes to go. So I just want to this is a by the way question, but it's something that I was thinking about. So what would you say about government to actually aid people to so that farmers are not running to the cities and congesting the urban places, that we actually have people in the community that's committed to farming activities? What do you say about if an initiative was brought about that we have a day for farming, like every day, 1 day of the week. So instead of having like about 5 days for working, we have 4 days for working, and the last day, maybe Friday, would be specifically for farming. That everybody should probably go develop a farm, or everybody within their own estate, or within their own community, or within their own house, farms. That way, we're actually encouraging the farming activities within our own sector. So it's now broken down, so the burden is not fully placed on the farming activities, and everybody can rely on themselves for small little things that they can produce by themselves. So what are you just thinking, like, in about 1 minute, since we're about to run out of time?
Hello,
uh
can you get me?
yes, I mean, you just in about a minute because we're about to run out of time.
Yeah, just to conclude, Femi, I would say it's a good thought from you. Synergy is very important. Collaboration also is very important. But of course, responsibility is more important, right? And then
Mm-hmm.
for government to be for government is not always a problem, and government is not also always the solution. We all are the problem, and I would say government should see agriculture as a business first, and we all should see agriculture as a business first,
Mm-hmm.
and most importantly. So, like if you are fixing the port in Lagos because you want logistic to be easy for goods that are going in and out of Nigeria, you know, it's the same like you should make good market, farm to market roads. When farmers have good roads from their farm to their market, they don't bother staying in the city. It's access.
Yeah.
When farmers have all the farm implements, when farmers have subsidies, when farmers have the good support from government, a policy system that actually protects farmers, an insurance system that actually ensures that farmers are protected, they have good safety net, even when the grow low in product, in production, they're actually protected. But then the idea of saying having a day that is called, where people will go, it's like creating regiment. It's like turning the whole country into a barrack, right? It should be a dynamic. Agriculture should be a culture, you know. It should be a culture where
Mm.
people should have the free willingness, the voluntariness, the voluntary willingness to grow crops, and it's all about the push. It should be backed with good innovation. It should be backed by innovativeness and a policy system that
Yeah.
encourages.
Yeah.
How the government cannot
Yes.
say there is a day where everybody should come out with a toothbrush and brush their tooth. Government says, or through the hospitals, that people should brush their tooth so they can look sparkly like. So, as a result of that, I think similarly that should be the same with agriculture. Farmers should be
Yeah.
encouraged using such
Mm.
very to make them actually do their work in the most
Yes.
efficient and effective way that provides the opportunities for food security for you and I and everybody. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Mr. Tabi Jordan. So that is all we have for today. I really learned a lot from your session, and I hope we can have you again on ICCDI Africa for our weekly series. Thank you so much. I can see you already throwing the corn up and down.
Yeah, thank you very much, Femi. And it's my pleasure,
Thank you.
and thank you very much for having me. I have to go back to work.
Yes,
I was
no
working, so
problem. Yes. Thank you for
And
taking our time for
take
us.
good care of yourself. Have a
Yes,
wonderful
yes,
time.
you
Bye.
too. You too. Take care.
Good. Good. Take care.